I still remember the exact moment it happened, the text that changed everything. I was in my boutique, helping a customer pick out a scarf, thinking about shipments and inventory, when my phone buzzed. I glanced down and froze. "I'm leaving you. I'm moving to Miami with someone else." I emptied our joint account. At first, I couldn't believe it. I mean, what? Did he really just do this over a text? My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't falter as I smiled at my customer, wrapped her purchase, and sent her on her way. But inside my heart was pounding. I felt that sharp, tightening pinch around my eyes, the kind that sneaks up on you when your world suddenly tilts. And yet, strangely, I also felt calm, almost like I'd been waiting for this moment without even knowing it. Because looking back, the signs had been there for months, creeping in slowly. Late nights at work, unexplained charges, little changes in his routine that didn't add up. And now I had a choice. I could crumble, or I could do something else. So I took a deep breath, locked up the boutique for the day, and told myself, all right, let's see how this plays out. My name is Anna, and I've spent most of my adult life building not just a family, but a life I was proud of. I grew up in a small town, the eldest of 3 siblings, always the responsible one. My parents taught me to work hard, to value honesty, and to stand up for myself, even when it wasn't easy. I carried those lessons into my marriage with David, a man I thought shared my dreams and values. We built a life together over 12 years, a cozy home filled with memories, weekend dinners with his parents and mine, and a boutique that I poured my heart into, which became both my pride and my sanctuary. I never imagined that the person I trusted most could one day betray me in such a casual, brutal way. That morning, I was in the middle of helping a regular customer, carefully arranging scarves on a display, humming softly to myself as the sunlight streamed through the shop windows. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced down, expecting a routine message or maybe a reminder from the supplier. But what I saw froze me in place. "I'm leaving you. I'm moving to Miami with someone else. I emptied our joint account. Haha." I blinked, staring at the screen as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less horrifying. But no. Each word stabbed like a cold, precise knife. My first instinct was disbelief. I mean, who does that? Who ends 12 years of marriage with a text, no conversation, no warning, no chance to even respond? My mind raced, flipping through the months before this moment, piecing together the signs I'd ignored, or maybe didn't want to see. David had been distant for weeks. I'd chalked it up to stress at work, long hours, or midlife restlessness. But now it all clicked into place. The late nights that never matched the deposits on our accounts, the sudden obsession with the gym, the wardrobe overhaul, and the way he had become so secretive, so slippery. And then there was the unimaginable betrayal, the knowledge that he had taken what we shared, our savings, our plans, and funneled it into a grand escape with a girl young enough to be our daughter. I took a steadying breath, forcing myself to move, to act. I wrapped the customer's purchase with a careful hand, my mind already racing through the steps I would need to protect myself. Part of me felt anger, yes, but beneath it was something stronger. A clarity I hadn't expected. David thought he was in control, that he could shock me into helplessness. Little did he know, I had already been preparing for months, quietly, meticulously. And now, the game had just begun. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, yet outwardly, I stayed composed. The customer in front of me, Mrs. Peterson, was chatting about her granddaughter's birthday party, oblivious to the storm raging in my mind. I smiled politely, selecting a soft cashmere scarf and holding it up against her coat, my hand steady, even though 1,000 thoughts were colliding behind my eyes. The text from David burned in my mind, but I couldn't let it show. Not here. Not now. There was only a small tightening around my eyes, a hint of the turmoil I felt, the faintest twitch that betrayed the calm facade I had so carefully constructed. My pulse raced as I wrapped the scarf in our signature silver paper, trying to focus on the crisp folds and neat ribbon, rather than the audacity of his betrayal. 12 years, gone in a few lines of text. 12 years of shared life and plans. And he thought he could reduce it all to a joke, ending with a cold, "Ha ha ha." When Mrs. Peterson finally left, chatting happily about her weekend plans, I exhaled slowly, my mind already shifting into action mode. I placed the wrapped scarf gently on the counter and glanced at my phone again. Every word David had sent replayed in my head. But instead of panic, I felt something unexpected. Clarity. He had no idea what was coming next. Looking back, the signs had been there for months. Subtle at first, almost easy to ignore if I'd wanted to. David started coming home later and later from work, claiming endless meetings and extra projects. I used to worry, sure, but I trusted him, or at least I thought I did. Then came the receipts that didn't match his stories. Fancy dinners he said were client meetings, hotel stays with no explanation, small charges that, when added together, formed a pattern I couldn't deny. And his behavior changed in ways that made me shiver even now. He suddenly became obsessed with the gym, spending hours there even when it interfered with family time. His wardrobe shifted overnight. Designer shirts, tight jeans, cologne I didn't recognize, like he was trying to reclaim a youth I had never known he missed. His phone became a mystery. Passwords changed, calls taken privately, texts disappearing as if they never existed. I remember one night, staring at my reflection in the boutique's window after closing, thinking, something isn't right here. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. And instincts are funny. They often arrive before the facts, whispering that the world isn't as it seems. I just didn't know yet how far the deception ran, or how audacious the betrayal would be. It was a chilly Thursday evening when I stumbled across the first undeniable evidence. I was sorting through old receipts, trying to balance our accounts, when one caught my eye. A dinner for two at an upscale restaurant downtown. I frowned. David had told me he was stuck at the office that night, knee-deep in reports and client calls. My stomach dropped. Wait, this doesn't make sense. I flipped through more statements and receipts, and a pattern began to emerge. Lavish dinners, hotel stays, charges that simply didn't align with his stories. Each discovery tightened the knot in my chest, a mix of shock, anger, and disbelief. 12 years, and yet here was proof that he had been lying, hiding, scheming. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was methodical, calculated, and audacious. I remember sitting on the edge of our bed, receipts scattered around me like shards of glass, thinking, how could he think I wouldn't notice? How could he be so reckless? The adrenaline surged, sharp and cold. This wasn't just suspicion anymore, this was concrete, undeniable proof, and with it came a grim realization. I needed a plan. I needed to protect what was mine, because suddenly nothing was off limits to him, and everything we shared felt like it could be stolen in an instant. The very next weekend, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and empowering. I opened my own bank account. Just me. Separate from David, separate from everything we shared. I remember the bank clerk's polite smile as I signed the papers, completely unaware of the storm I was navigating behind my calm exterior. My heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. Fear of what I was uncovering, and determination not to be caught off guard again. I transferred my personal savings into the new account, carefully noting every deposit, every movement. It felt almost absurdly meticulous at first, but I knew I couldn't leave anything to chance. Every dollar mattered, every record mattered. I wasn't just protecting money, I was protecting my independence, my future, my sanity. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a small stack of receipts and bank statements, lining them up like clues in a mystery I never asked to solve. I could feel the tension in my shoulders easing slightly. Finally, I had a place I controlled, a way to track what he was up to without tipping him off. And yes, a tiny part of me felt a flicker of satisfaction. He might have thought he could outsmart me, but little did he know. I was ready. Over the next year, I became almost obsessive in my attention to detail. Every receipt, every charge, every late-night withdrawal, nothing escaped my notice. I created folders for every category: restaurants, hotels, credit card statements, mysterious online purchases. It felt like assembling a puzzle I never wanted to complete, yet the pieces were falling into place faster than I could have imagined. Each discovery stung, but it also strengthened my resolve. There were nights I sat alone in the quiet of our living room, laptop open, comparing bank statements to his stories, noting inconsistencies, double-checking dates. Some nights, frustration threatened to overwhelm me. How could he be so careless? I would mutter under my breath, amazed at the audacity, the sheer boldness of it all. But I also felt a strange satisfaction, proof, finally, that I wasn't imagining things, that my instincts had been right all along. By the end of the year, I had detailed records of every suspicious transaction, every unexplained expense, a timeline that showed a pattern of deception and premeditation. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about clarity, about protection, about having the evidence I might one day need to take control and reclaim what was rightfully mine. And little did he know, I was ready. Even as I tracked every suspicious transaction, I made sure my boutique's finances were completely separate from our joint accounts. It was an impulsive decision. It had been a principle I insisted on from the beginning. My boutique was my creation. My sweat and dreams poured into every display, every designer handbag carefully selected. David had grumbled at first, calling my meticulous bookkeeping obsessive, but I knew better. I kept detailed records, separate accounts, and property documents all in my name, no shared access, no loopholes. There were nights I reviewed the boutique's profit margins, payroll, and expenses, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. This wasn't just about safeguarding money. It was about independence, about creating a space that no betrayal could touch. I thought about the house I'd inherited from my grandmother, the boutique I had built from scratch, and the countless hours of work no one else would ever understand. Sometimes I caught myself smiling at the irony, while he was planning secret dinners and mysterious trips. Oblivious to how carefully I'd structured everything, I had already shielded the assets that mattered most. Little did he know, the very things he thought he could control were untouchable. And that thought gave me a quiet, simmering satisfaction I hadn't expected. When David's first text finally came through, my chest tightened for just a fraction of a second before clarity took over. "I've been leaving you. I'm moving to Miami with someone else." I emptied our joint account. I stared at the words as if seeing them in slow motion. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw my phone across the room, to let the fury consume me, but I didn't. Not even close. Instead, I did the only thing that made sense. I took a deep breath, set my phone aside, and focused on my boutique. I helped the next customer with a calm, measured smile, selecting a scarf and wrapping it in silver paper like every other day. Externally, I was composed. Internally, I was sharpening my mind, cataloging every word, every taunt, every audacious claim. It was strange, this mix of anger and calm. Anger at his audacity, at the betrayal, at the casual cruelty of it all. And calm, because I had been preparing for this moment, consciously or not. I knew what I had: evidence, separate accounts, control over my property. He thought he could shock me, but I was ready. And more than anything, I felt a thrill at the thought of the irony. He believed he was in charge, while I quietly held all the cards. After setting down my phone, I didn't linger in shock or anger. Instead, I grabbed my planner, flipped to the notes section, and dialed my lawyer. I'd met with her a few months earlier, quietly, after noticing a few suspicious charges that didn't make sense. At the time, it felt almost paranoid, but now that paranoia had transformed into strategy. "Hi, it's Anna," I said, my voice steady, though my mind raced 1,000 steps ahead. "It's time." I explained everything: the texts, the emptying of the joint account, the pattern of suspicious spending, and the evidence I had collected over the past year. As I spoke, I could feel a strange sense of empowerment building. This was no longer just about betrayal or heartbreak. This was about protecting myself, my assets, my life. My lawyer's calm, methodical responses were reassuring, confirming that every step I had taken, from separating my boutique-esque finances to documenting each transaction, had created a strong foundation. Together, we began outlining the next steps: freezing accounts, filing claims, preparing legal documents. I hung up with a sense of grim satisfaction. He might have thought he had the upper hand with his flashy escape plan, but little did he know. The real game was just beginning, and I was in complete control. By the time I hung up the phone with my lawyer, I felt a strange mix of adrenaline and calm focus. I immediately called the bank and credit card companies, reporting the fraudulent charges David had made on our joint accounts. Each click and tap as I navigated the secure lines felt like taking back control of a life he had tried to sabotage. The first charges were outrageous: first-class tickets, a luxury hotel in Miami, expenses clearly meant for his new girlfriend's indulgences. I provided the screenshots of his texts, the admissions, the audacious "haha" he had appended like a taunt. The bank rep confirmed that the cards would be canceled and all fraudulent charges reversed. I even requested that he be removed as an authorized user, watching as the hold went into effect like a silent victory. Then came the freezing of shared assets. My lawyer had already prepped the documents, and within hours, I had ensured that nothing else could be taken without my consent. I remember leaning back in my chair, exhaling slowly, and almost laughing. The audacity of his actions, so bold, so careless, had created the very evidence I needed to protect myself. David thought he was running the show, but in reality, I was the one quietly orchestrating every move. And oh, he had no idea what was coming next. The texts kept coming, each one more absurd than the last. David seemed to believe that his condescension could unnerve me, that mocking my age or dismissing my boutique would somehow give him the upper hand. "At least you have your little shop to keep you busy," one read, dripping with derision. Another jabbed at my age, hinting that I might never find anyone else, or that I was somehow irrelevant. I stared at the screen, a mixture of disbelief and quiet fury rising inside me. And yet, I didn't respond. I didn't react. I watched as he flailed through words meant to wound, documenting each insult, each taunt, each careless admission. It was almost comical. The way he assumed that belittling me would change reality, as if mocking my independence could erase the careful boundaries I had established. With every text, I felt the stakes rising, but also a strange sense of satisfaction. He was revealing everything I needed: his premeditation, his reckless use of shared finances, his attempts to manipulate perception. I quietly forwarded screenshots to my lawyer, building a dossier that was only growing stronger. While he thought he was in control, I was calmly collecting the evidence that would prove just how wrong he was. And, oh, the irony was delicious. He seemed to think that by emptying our joint account and controlling the money we shared, he had finally gained the upper hand. Every text he sent carried that smug, self-satisfied tone, as if I would crumble at the thought of being financially powerless. Did he really think I'd be helpless? I kept telling myself as I stared at the screen, my pulse steady despite the audacity before me. But here's the thing. I had already anticipated this. Every deposit, Every bill, every cent I had earned through my boutique was carefully accounted for, separate from our shared finances. His victory was built on ignorance. He had no idea that I had been quietly preparing for months, tracking every suspicious transaction, documenting every charge, and protecting my assets. I remember leaning back in my chair, a quiet smile tugging at my lips, realizing how spectacularly wrong he was. The more he flaunted his assumed power, the deeper he dug his own hole. Every move he made, every reckless charge, every condescending text was being collected, logged, and preserved. The power he thought he wielded? It was fleeting, fragile, and entirely in my hands to neutralize. I began meticulously documenting every single message he sent, treating each text as a piece of evidence in a case I knew I might have to present. Screenshots, timestamps, careful notes. I organized them into folders labeled by date, tone, and content. Some messages were almost laughable in their audacity, while others dripped with the kind of condescension that made my skin crawl. It was strange, this duality of emotions. On one hand, there was the fury, the sting of betrayal, the disbelief that someone I had shared 12 years of my life with could act so recklessly. On the other hand, there was a calm satisfaction, a quiet thrill at knowing that each word he sent only strengthened my position. The more he tried to intimidate or mock me, the clearer the pattern of his recklessness became. I remember sitting at my kitchen table late one night, the glow of my laptop illuminating the organized chaos of evidence around me, thinking, he has no idea what he's setting himself up for. Each screenshot, each text, each admission of premeditation was a puzzle piece falling perfectly into place. And with every entry I saved, I felt the tide of control slowly shifting back into my hands. The day of the hearing arrived, and I felt a strange mix of nerves and calm focus. My lawyer, poised and professional, presented the evidence I had spent months collecting. Screenshots of his texts admitting to emptying the joint account, records of fraudulent credit card charges, and a meticulously documented trail of hidden expenses were laid out before the judge. I sat quietly, feeling a surge of satisfaction with each piece of proof introduced. It was almost surreal to watch him squirm in his chair, his confident facade cracking as the magnitude of his own recklessness was revealed. My lawyer walked through each document with precision, showing not just the financial damage, but the premeditation behind every move he had made. I could see the subtle shifts in his expression, frustration, panic, disbelief, and I had to suppress a small, vindicated smile. As I watched the judge absorb the evidence, I realized that months of careful preparation, of protecting my assets, documenting every suspicious activity, and maintaining my composure, had brought me to this moment. The betrayal that had seemed so overwhelming before had been transformed into undeniable proof of his misconduct, and for the first time in months, I felt fully in control. When the judge finally addressed the courtroom, my heart raced, but I remained calm, every nerve alert. This is it, I thought. The judge carefully reviewed the documents, my lawyer's meticulous presentation, and the evidence of David's reckless actions. Then came the words I had been hoping for: my boutique, my personal savings, and my house, all legally recognized as separate assets. I felt a rush of relief and quiet triumph wash over me. Years of careful planning, of keeping my business and personal finances separate, had paid off. Every hour spent tracking expenses, maintaining records, and protecting what was mine had not been in vain. The betrayal I had endured, the audacity of David's actions, had been neutralized by preparation, foresight, and patience. I glanced at him across the courtroom, the same man who had believed that emptying our accounts and flaunting his supposed victory would give him control. Now, he looked smaller, cornered, powerless, while I felt the steady satisfaction of someone who had turned betrayal into empowerment. The weight lifted off my shoulders, replaced with the confidence that no reckless act, no matter how brazen, could undermine what I had built, safeguarded, and earned through my own hard work. The courtroom buzzed with a tense quiet as the judge delivered the next part of the ruling. David E.'s claims were dismissed, and all shared assets were frozen pending the final settlement. My chest swelled with a mixture of relief and vindication. After months of careful documentation, late-night calculations, and meticulous preparation, the system had finally acknowledged the truth. His reckless attempts to seize control would not succeed. I watched him sit there, shifting uncomfortably in his chair, realizing that the confidence he had flaunted for so long was crumbling. Every misstep, every impulsive purchase, every condescending text had been recorded, preserved, and now it had become the very evidence that protected me. I felt a quiet sense of triumph knowing that patience, strategy, and foresight had rendered his audacity powerless. As I left the courtroom, I couldn't help but feel the irony settle over me like a warm cloak. The betrayal that had once threatened to unravel my life had, instead, illuminated my strength, my careful planning, and my resilience. What he thought would be his victory had become a testament to my foresight, and the final chapter was only just beginning. In the months following the courtroom victory, I poured myself into my boutique with renewed energy, determination, and vision. What had once been a single, cozy shop transformed into a flourishing enterprise. I opened a second location, then a third, each one reflecting the personality, care, and style that I had built from scratch. Every new store felt like a small victory, a reminder that my efforts and independence could never be undermined. The online store came next, expanding our reach beyond the city limits, connecting with customers across the country. I still remember the thrill of seeing orders from distant states pour in, each one a testament to the trust and admiration people had for the brand I had nurtured. Friends, customers, and even strangers began to admire not just the products, but the story behind them. The resilience, the foresight, and the empowerment that had turned a personal betrayal into a professional triumph. There were moments when I paused, reflecting on how far I had come. The boutique was no longer just a business. It was a symbol of independence, a testament to what careful planning, dedication, and self-belief could achieve. And deep down, I knew that the challenges I had faced, the betrayal I had endured, had been the unexpected catalyst that pushed me to reach heights I might never have imagined. As my boutique continued to thrive, I began receiving invitations I never imagined. Local business magazines wanted to feature my story, chambers of commerce sought my insights, and young entrepreneurs approached me for advice. At first, it felt surreal. Me, Anna, the woman who had once sat quietly at my boutique counter while my life seemed to unravel, now being recognized as someone whose experience could inspire others. I remember one particular afternoon when a young woman, bright-eyed and eager, asked me about separating personal finances from business accounts. Her enthusiasm reminded me of my early days, the mistakes I had avoided, and the lessons I had learned the hard way. I smiled, sharing what I knew: preparation, careful documentation, trusting your instincts, and never letting anyone else control your hard-earned independence. Her gratitude and excitement filled me with an unexpected pride. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about legacy, empowerment, and the ripple effect one person's foresight and resilience could have on others. Every success of the boutique, every expansion, and every recognition became more than just a personal victory. It became a message. Even in the face of betrayal and upheaval, careful planning, courage, and persistence could transform hardship into inspiration. Meanwhile, David's life seemed to unravel in ways I hadn't anticipated but secretly expected. Rumors trickled back through mutual acquaintances. The Miami adventure he had dreamed of had collapsed almost immediately. Expensive hotels replaced by modest rentals, credit cards maxed out, and a social circle that began to drift away as his recklessness became clear. Each update I heard felt like the echo of a lesson learned too late. I didn't gloat. It wasn't about that. Instead, I felt a quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes from knowing you've protected yourself, worked hard, and remained steady while someone else's impulsiveness caught up with them. My boutique thrived. expanding to multiple locations, attracting loyal customers, and earning recognition not just as a store, but as a symbol of resilience and independence. There were moments I paused, reflecting on the contrast. While he scrambled to rebuild from mistakes, I was celebrating new milestones, mentoring young entrepreneurs, and planning the next phase of my business. The irony wasn't lost on me. His attempt to control me had only highlighted my foresight and strength. And in that calm, confident pride, I realized that true empowerment isn't revenge. It's living fully, successfully, and independently, despite what anyone else thought they could take from you. Looking back on everything, I realize how crucial those small decisions were. The ones that felt tedious at the time, like meticulously logging expenses or keeping my boutique's finances separate from our joint accounts. At the moment, I didn't fully appreciate that these practices weren't just about organization. They were about protection, empowerment, and foresight. Every receipt I saved, every document I filed, every careful distinction between personal and business money became a lifeline when betrayal struck. I can stress enough how separating assets and keeping detailed financial records isn't paranoia. It is preparation. It gives you clarity, security, and when the unexpected happens, an undeniable strength. David's reckless actions were a test I hadn't asked for, but because I had taken these precautions, I wasn't scrambling, panicking, or vulnerable. I was ready. I could act decisively, protect what was mine, and turn a potentially devastating situation into a story of resilience and triumph. Now, when young entrepreneurs or friends ask me for advice, this is the lesson I share with them. Protect your independence, document diligently, and never underestimate the value of keeping personal and business assets distinct. In the end, it's not just about money, it's about control over your life, your future, and your peace of mind. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's the importance of trusting your instincts, especially when the signs of betrayal appear. For months, small red flags had whispered warnings. Late nights he couldn't fully explain, unexpected expenses, secretive phone habits, and a sudden obsession with recapturing his youth. At the time, I questioned myself. Was I overreacting? Was I imagining things? But that nagging feeling in my gut never left me, and I chose to listen. That intuition guided every step I took. Opening a separate bank account, documenting suspicious transactions, maintaining strict boundaries between my boutique's finances and our shared assets. It gave me the clarity to act decisively when the betrayal finally came to light, and it prevented panic or rash decisions. I realized that instincts aren't just feelings. They're a form of inner intelligence, a protective mechanism honed by experience and awareness. Looking back, I can't help but marvel at how trusting that inner voice changed everything. What could have been a devastating, disempowering situation became a story of resilience and empowerment. If something feels off, don't dismiss it. Pay attention, act thoughtfully, and trust yourself. Sometimes your instincts are the first line of defense when life tries to blindside you. One of the most important lessons I learned through all of this was the power of remaining calm, even when emotions were running high. When David's texts arrived, dripping with condescension and arrogance, it would have been easy to react impulsively, to lash out or cry. But I didn't. I focused on staying composed, keeping my mind clear and thinking strategically. At the same time, I made it a point to document everything. Every text, every receipt, every suspicious transaction over the months. It felt tedious at times, but those records became my shield and my weapon. With each screenshot and bank statement carefully filed, I knew I was building an unassailable case, a way to protect myself and my assets. Finally, using legal channels effectively was key. I reached out to my lawyer promptly, followed her guidance meticulously, and let the system work in my favor. Patience and preparation turned what could have been a chaotic, emotionally devastating experience into a controlled, strategic process. And when the court recognized my evidence, all the careful work, calm resolve, and attention to detail paid off. In moments like these, I realized staying level-headed, documenting diligently, and using the law wisely isn't just smart, it's empowering. Looking back, I realize now that true empowerment isn't T about revenge or proving someone wrong. It's S about preparation, self-respect, and building your independence. When David thought he could hurt me, control me, or take what I had built, I had already laid the foundation to protect myself. My strength didn't come from retaliation. It came from foresight, careful planning, and unwavering belief in my own worth. Every step I took, separating my finances, documenting his behavior, maintaining my boutique, and trusting my instincts, was about preserving my independence. And as I watched my business thrive, expand to multiple locations, and inspire others, I realized that empowerment is living on your own terms. It's having the freedom to make choices, to grow, and to succeed without being dependent on anyone who would undermine you. Even the moments of betrayal, the sting of his condescending texts, and the chaos he tried to create became lessons. Proof that respecting yourself and preparing for the unexpected is far more powerful than seeking petty revenge. I had turned a painful situation into a story of resilience, growth, and real empowerment. And that, I think, is the ultimate triumph. Even now, months later, as I walk through my boutique and see the bustle of happy customers, I still feel a mix of pride, relief, and a quiet lingering of what once was. The betrayal, the chaos, the texts, they're all memories, but they shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. Some days, a fleeting thought of what could have been crosses my mind, and I catch myself wondering how different things might have played out if I hadn't trusted my instincts or stayed prepared. Life moves forward, but it doesn't erase the echoes of the past. And that's okay. I've learned that true strength comes from acknowledging it, learning from it, and letting it guide you without letting it define you. Have you ever faced a moment where trusting yourself made all the difference? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my story. If it resonated with you, feel free to like, share, or subscribe. Your support means more than you know. And remember, sometimes the best victories come not from revenge, but from quietly building your own life and strength.